All right, so today we're going to go ahead and learn how to make alphas, tileable alphas inside of ZBrush. So the first thing we're going to want to do, I'm going to hit comma to exit out of that menu. And I'm going to set the document up first. I like to set up the document before I add anything to my scene. We want to make sure that this is perfectly tileable. In most tileable scenarios, we're using square formats. So I'm going to set my document up to be 1024 by 1024 so that it's a pretty light, small scale document. Light as in the size or the amount of memory used. Now, I come up here and I click on my document menu. Down here, we can see that we have our width and height. And by default, this constrain proportions button is turned on. I'm going to turn that off. That way I can independently adjust the width and the height without them constraining those proportions. So I'm just going to type in 1024, tab down 1024, and hit resize. All right, so you can see now that it drops us out to this nice square. All right, so now what we're going to be doing is sculpting onto a plane. So I'm going to come up here to Simple Brush, click on that, and come out here and find my polyplane, plane 3D. Here we go. Click on that guy, and I'm going to drag this out. So I'm just going to left click, drag. I'm going to try to get it about as square as I can, and then hold Shift. Notice that clicking Shift snaps it to an aligned state. I'm going to drop that there and come up here and hit Edit. All right. Now, if we come over to our subtools, we can see that we have our plane 3D. If we hit F, we can see that it fills up the entire screen perfectly. All right. Now, what we're going to want is two planes. We're going to sculpt on one and use the other one to focus in and out on. All right. So this top one, I'm going to name my focus. First, I'm going to make duplicates. So I'm going to quickly make a duplicate of that guy. I'm going to rename this top one as my focus plane. All right. And I'm going to come down to this guy. This is going to be my first alpha. You can call it whatever you'd like. For the purposes of this demonstration, I'm just going to call this alpha 01. All right. So focus plane is what we're going to use with the F hotkey to focus in or frame in onto our plane, square everything up real nice. And the alpha is what we're actually going to sculpt on. All right. Now, I'm going to rotate these just a little bit so I can see what's going on. And I'm going to scale up the alpha and move it forward. So I'm going to hit W, move this forward a little bit. Now you can see we have two planes. You move it as far forward as you like. For me, just a little bit off center is fine, or off of the original is fine, I should say. And then we're going to scale this up. Now you can use the gizmo, or you can pan down just a little bit to deformation, and you'll see size right here. We can just size this guy up by 100% if you want. And then we're going to come back over to our subtool. Notice that we're still rotated, so I'm going to come back over here to the draw. We're still rotated. So I'm going to rotate back towards where I need to go and hold Shift. That way it snaps to that front plane. I'm going to click my focus plane and hit F. All right. Now we're going to go sculpt on the alpha. Now, before we start sculpting, we have to come up to our brush menu. I'm going to scroll down to curve. And inside of curve, we have what's called wrap mode. All right. I'm going to click this up to 1. You can drive this thing all the way up to 6, but for our current purposes, 1 will do. I'm going to hit 1. And then out here, inside of our plane, you'll see that as I draw, my brush repeats itself on the opposite side, right? Just like so. Now, if you have dynamic perspective turned on, notice that it warps your image. We want to keep this turned off. While I like to have dynamic perspective turned on, it helps me sculpt when I'm sculpting a giant 3D object, rotating around it. When I'm sculpting a alpha, I need to have this off so that it doesn't warp my edges, right? When I save out an alpha, if I have dynamic perspective turned on, my alpha will not be perfectly tileable. It'll be close, but it won't work perfectly. All right, so keep dynamic perspective turned off. All right, so from here, I would use Command D, and that's just going to subdivide your alpha layer. All right, I'm going to get this up to about 1 million polys. That way I can really start to see what I'm sculpting here. All right, I'm just quickly going to do a little design just so that we can see how this is going to work. All right. So let's say that we're making up something that maybe has kind of a rocky texture to it, right? Right now, I'm just using my standard brush. It's nothing fancy. And obviously, you can still sculpt in with your Alt key and sculpt out with your normal brush. You can also switch over to other brushes, right? So if I were to come into my brush menu, maybe I say I want my clay buildup brush, right? BCB. Well, there we go. This brush, if I start sculpting, notice it doesn't repeat, right? That's because I haven't turned on the curve for this brush. So I'm going to have to come back up here, come back down to curve, and turn it on, turn my wrap mode on for this particular brush. All right. So now when I come in here and I start sculpting, and I want to come over this other side, whatever, I can see that I'm getting my warp or my wrap effect as I would have expected with my other brush, right? The one that I've already set up. All right. Now, let's say that I have this particular sculpt, and this is exactly what I want, right? This isn't by any means beautiful, but for the sake of speeding things up, let's say that this is exactly what I'm looking for. How do I capture this current look and feel? Well, if I come over here to my alpha or up to the alpha menu, I like doing it out of here because it's a bigger button. I scroll over to grab dock. I click that and notice that now my alpha map has changed to an alpha map that represents what is currently captured inside of my document space. All right. From here, I can click this again, come over, hit export, and export out my current alpha as a PSD, a bitmap, or a TIFF, and send it to wherever I need to, name it wherever I need to. All right. And cancel out that. Now, what if your the alpha that you're trying to create requires something much larger, or I'm sorry, not larger, requires other objects or other subtools. right? Perhaps whatever it is that you're doing could be benefited by the addition of a bunch of spheres or other shapes. Maybe you've sculpted a pebble and you want to put little pebbles all throughout here. Well, we can come over and add in or append in additional subtools. So if I append, let's come over here and just add this sphere. So I'm going to add my sphere. I'm going to select my sphere, scale it down. I'm going to move this guy around. You can either rotate your mask or you can come over here to where it says offset. Currently it's set in X. If I click Z and turn off X, I can pull this thing forward and back inside of the Z axis. All right, I can select whichever axis I want or all axes at the same time. All right, so I have that guy. Maybe I want a few more of these. Pull this guy down like this. Now, maybe I want another. I'm going to hold Control and drag out another one, right? And you can do this until your heart's content. Scale them down, drag them around to get whatever the desired effect is that you're shooting for. All right. Once you're done, I want to come back up here and make sure I select my alpha, come over here, draw, alpha, move down to grab dock. Now, if we look, we can see that we have these circles inside of the alpha itself, right? So the spheres are now influencing what the alpha is looking like. So then we would just come out here again, export this new map, name it accordingly, send it to where you need to, and select your format, either a PSD, bitmap, or a TIFF. All right. Spend some time on these, and you're going to have, hopefully, a good bit of fun creating them. And you can develop yourself your own little library of personalized textures that you can use to create or add higher levels of detail to all of your future projects. All right.